In our next segment, we want to look more at politics from a Christian worldview point of view. Boris Johnson used to be the Prime Minister a month ago.
He certainly did.
And as you know, we now have a different Prime Minister on a monthly basis, it seems.
Yes.
That's one way to do it. He was looking like he was going to be in the race to be not only the previous Prime Minister, but the next Prime Minister.
Yes.
You know they get like a pension. Is it 120,000 for life, something like that, a year?
115,000.
Okay. Well, Liz Truss, of course, gets that, even though she was only Prime Minister for 45 days.
Even though people have appealed that she shouldn't?
Well, I would, wouldn't you? Boris Johnson, he must be getting it, obviously, because he's left as Prime Minister.
Yes.
When Boris Johnson pulled out of the race, it left Rishi Sunak as just
the only contender.
Really the only real contender to be Prime Minister.
Because Penny Mordaunt got in the low
less than
30s,
30.
Something like that.
Yeah, about that sort of number of MPs supporting her. Now, this just a bit of a stitch-up. Boris Johnson met with Rishi Sunak, and he said the reason for withdrawing was that Rishi Sunak and others, I think he meant and Penny Mordaunt as well, would not join with him together to try and draw the party together, so he withdrew. Do you think that's true? Was that his reasoning? Or was it that he came in, as some are suggesting, to suck all the oxygen out of the room so that others couldn't get a number of MPs because some were considering going with Boris, and then when he withdrew, it all goes to Rishi Sunak. So it was a coronation of Rishi Sunak rather than a serious bid by Boris Johnson. What do you think?
I don't know. I seriously don't have an opinion about it. We are told that there were telephone talks between Boris and Rishi over the weekend. Presumably they came to nothing. I think the big thing against Boris was this fact that had he entered the race in a proper way and been up against Rishi Sunak, there would have been one thing against Boris that one could not quantify, and that is this indictment against him for his behaviour in the summer. And nobody seems to know in which direction that will go. And my opinion about that was, why hasn't that been decided in the last 6 months? Why is it still standing over Boris Johnson now?
Is it deliberate so that he can't get back in? Interesting. But do you think then, just looking forward on this, Rishi Sunak is in some ways a very British figure, went to public school and all that, but he is of foreign extraction, as we used to say. He's not a Christian, he's a Hindu. Do you think that there's any chance that he'd be voted in as Prime Minister with these factors? The fact that he comes from the Indian subcontinent and that he's not Christian and he's not nothing, not no religion, he's Hindu. Does this mean that people wouldn't want him to be Prime Minister in general in Britain?
I think it must be true that there would be some people who wouldn't want him as Prime Minister and would activate against him. As a Christian, I would prefer there to be a Christian Prime Minister.
When have we had a Christian Prime Minister, would you say? Actually, Tony Blair said he was Christian, and Theresa May said she was Christian.
Yes, I agree that both of those...
both very different Prime Ministers.
...stated that they were Christians, that they believed in God.
Tony Blair converted to Catholicism. I think it was after leaving office, but I'm not sure. It might have been still there, but he was Anglican, converted to Catholicism, whereas Theresa May was
he did have a Catholic wife.
Other Prime Ministers, great Prime Ministers like Winston Churchill, he wasn't a Christian. He described himself in the usual pithy way that he did as a supporter of the church, like a great buttress from the outside.
Right. There are one or two other people who have not used those exact words, but said they're a supporter.
Liz Truss, for example, said that. Yeah. It would be good to have a Christian Prime Minister, but my question is, we've looked at this leadership race, and Rishi Sunak looking like he'll be the one to lead the Conservative Party into the next election. Does it mean that we won't get a Christian Prime Minister because Keir Starmer isn't Christian either? So that would be really the two alternatives.
OK, I can definitely say that I would never vote for Labour. Never, ever.
What is the reason for that? You've said it on air before, but just remind listeners.
Because I don't like the Labour Party being in the pocket of the trade unions. Because I regard trade unionism as a form of communism.
Well, that's certainly the case with some trade unions. And my personal decisions have done that, in that I've never been a member of any union, including when I was a teacher. You must be a union to keep yourself safe, and I wasn't prepared to do it. I've never been a member of a union for the same reason that you give. But if you have a clash vying for leadership between Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, you have actually two people whose loyalties may be seen to be not to the electorate. Yeah, you can see the unions for Labour, but Keir Starmer is part of that group of people, the World Economic Forum we were talking about earlier, and he has globalist tendencies, beliefs, and a big supporter of the European Union, of course. Now, Rishi Sunak has links with big supranational corporations, Goldman Sachs, etc., and his money is kept outside the country, as is well known. So what we have there is two candidates for Prime Minister who really can't be seen to have been loyal. You could question their loyalty to Britain. Is that a problem?
I think so. I think it is a problem. I think, first of all, Rishi Sunak will have to do something about double taxation relief.
Yes.
Because he didn't make the law about double taxation.
No, he took advantage of it, yeah. He took advantage of it, yes. The weird thing about it is, just because there's a law there, you don't have to use it to your own benefit.
No, it can be mightily persuasive.
It's like this where people complain about the taxes being too low. Putting down taxes is terrible. Yeah, well, you can pay more if you want. Norman, what do you think?
I'd like to go back to the Christian worldview and to basically say that we would seek somebody to lead the country who has a Christian leading or sympathy. And I feel, and I've expressed this a few times on Flame, that Liz Truss was the right person for those very limited number of times when the Prime Minister of the UK had to appear in a religious service in a Church of England church together with the monarch with regard to the Queen's funeral. And Liz Truss met God's criteria for that, whatever God's criteria really is. And I'll let our listeners run off to the Bible and say, what is God's criteria for somebody standing in a religious service in an Anglican church? I feel that Rishi Sunak would not have met God's criteria. So I have a question that says there is the coronation. Is it May or is it June?
May.
And that is a religious service in an Anglican church. And so therefore, if I was God, who would I set up to be the Prime Minister at that time that they could be involved in that service? How do I actually steer things so that either Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer actually is the Prime Minister at that time? And if I was God, what would I be doing between now and May, you said, to make sure that that happened? Perhaps that brings in the whole question of a general election, doesn't it? God thinks on different levels from what we think.
He certainly does.
Yes.
And I think God can quite easily arrange it without the Prime Minister being involved in the coronation at all.
Yeah.
How can that happen?
Well, just by not involving the Prime Minister, not using him in any way to perform any kind of ceremony within that coronation.
Yeah.
Well, that is to do with the religious authorities making decisions on order of service and things like that.
Well, exactly. And the order of service can be purely Anglican and not involve any temporal power at all.
We'll have this discussion at the beginning of June to see whether it did actually happen.
Yes, looking forward to that already. The future of Britain isn't looking good because this sort of leadership, whether it's Sunak or whether it's Starmer, is sort of more of the same that we've had for the past 20 years or so, and we're heading down and down and down. Big taxation, big government, the country run for the benefit of large companies and supranational organisations and not for the people within it. It's not looking good for the future, so we need to pray about that. We need more individual liberty, and with that, of course, goes individual responsibility going forward. It doesn't look like we're going to be given it, but that doesn't mean we can't exercise it as far as we're able.